This is Jeremy Jorgensen, host of the Why Edify podcast, proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Each show on the network is independently owned, and the views expressed may not represent those of other podcasts. For the best education podcasts, visit edupodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast, where each week we talk about a free piece or two of technology that you can use in your classroom. I'm your host, Shanna Martin. I'm a middle school teacher, technology, and instructional coach for my district.
And I'm her husband, Fuzz Martin, and my mission is to produce this podcast for us.
I'm glad you practiced out in the car.
Yeah, I did. It's a good one. Hi. Welcome to our lives and our show.
Yes.
It's really your show. I'm just here to push the buttons.
To hang out.
Yeah.
Yay. So we are in season 7, episode 209. It is April and the sun is finally shining, and it's super deceptive because it's actually really cold out.
Yeah.
It was like, roll down the windows, wear a t-shirt. Yeah, it's like 49 degrees outside. But I guess in Wisconsin, that is t-shirt weather, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, for me.
Yeah.
At least shorts and a hoodie.
I was just say shorts and a hoodie.
Yeah.
And knee socks. It's classy.
With my slippers in the house, yeah.
That's a classy one.
And now you have a picture into our life.
Yes. Well, it is April, and we're talking about fun things. So I've talked about this before, but I teach social studies along with like technology and instructional coaching and stuff. And I have been using a very cool site that it was like linked through PBS. That's kind of how I found it. And for those that teach social studies or just different things in history, it doesn't even have to be a social studies teacher, really. There's a really cool site that I ran across and use in my classroom now. And it's called Mission US.
Mission US.
Mission US. So it's literally mission-us.org. And its whole goal is to teach about some major events in U.S. history, which, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there, but this is the first one that I found where my kids are interested in it, and it's interactive, but it teaches topics that encourage like a lot of discussion. So
okay.
Anyway, my top 5 things why I really like this website is it's super engaging and thought provoking. So it doesn't just like skim over information. It's like a simulator. It puts kids into the situation and gives them kind of a storyline to follow, which has sparked really good discussion from my students. And it can be done in small increments. Like you don't have to assign the whole thing at once. You can actually break down the mission into like the prologue, and then there's like different sections. And each one, as it's teaching about like U.S. history and different things that are like challenging, like the discussion points are there. But as a teacher, it also has lesson plan guides, and it will break it down. Like if they do the whole simulator, it would take like 2.5 hours if they did it in one sitting, and nobody has to do it in 2.5 hours ever. You can just break it down, and then it gives you like exit tickets for your classroom and discussion points and questions. And then it has like PD for teachers as to how to teach these things. Like there's just all these cool elements that go with it. And I'll talk about that with the site in a second. But like it's well done. It's very clearly explained and like has support for teachers when you're teaching the information.
Mm-hmm.
It engages like critical discussions, and I've been using it with my students, and they've been talking about parts of it where I only assigned like one portion. I assigned one of the prologues to go with some, and they like, well, can we go forward if we want to? I'm like, sure, like we will get there eventually. And like, oh, well, I really want to complete this because I want to know like more about, or I want to engage in more information about the topic because we're talking about the topics in class and I'm teaching about them. And then they also have like vocabulary supports in there where as you're going through the game, like you pull the vocabulary and you add it to little dictionaries. So you have like specific vocabulary that goes with the topics. it's just all very cool and very, very well done when you have to have like conversations about topics in history. They're kind of like, where do I start to make this appropriate for students, but also talk about it at the same time. So if you go to mission-us.org, it is created, and they say kind of like 6th grade on up.
Okay.
I will say the child in our house is a 4th grader, and she played. And she gets parts of it, obviously, as a parent of teaching social studies. We talk about these things. So she knows about some of it. But also she just picked, like, she doesn't get the full depth of what the information is at her age. But I would say probably 6th grade on up for having it in your classroom. And as a teacher, you create your own teacher account and you have a teacher dashboard, which is really cool because as a teacher, then I assign, like, all of my students have a login and then they have a password. And I just set the same password for all my kids because it's an assignment. And I can manage my classes, but I can go into each assignment. So let's pick the Dust Bowl. So the game for the Dust Bowl is called
Up from the Dust.
Up from the Dust. 1929. It's the Great Depression. It's all about the Great Depression. And when you go in, like my teacher dashboard where I've assigned to my students, I can see how many students have started the simulator and then how many students have completed it by section of the simulator. So like there's a prologue, boom or bust, neighbors in need, riding the rails, a new deal for some, California or dust, epilogue. So it walks you almost through the story of it, like everything that's going on. It gives you the background of the characters, the people you're going to encounter. There's trailer videos. Like, again, it's really well done where you are.
You are one of the Dunn twins, growing up on a Texas wheat farm.
So it gives you like the background of like what storyline you're going to jump into and then what you need to decide. And then if I click on prologue, I can see which of my students have started it, which of my students have finished, and then how well they scored if there is specific like quiz questions or questions involved. Not every section has that. And then I can see the average class score for each section as well. So I can track all my students as they go through. I had my students go through and write a reflection afterwards, like, wow, I didn't think about this. And if I chose this information, then this happened. And we had really good conversations about it. And they were all hung up on, you get to name the cow in the prologue of the Dust Bowl. And I can't tell you how many conversations started with, hey, what did you name the cow? Because there's like 3 choices. Like, oh, yeah, I named her Amelia Earhart, too. And I'm like, okay, what else did we learn? And they're like, oh, well, I didn't realize, like, when you have to choose between are you keeping cattle or are you keeping crops? And then there was no rainfall. So then they like lost money on the crops. Like then we had real discussions afterwards. And I was impressed with how much information they pulled from just the prologue. And then we did the other pieces as we went through. But just starting them off that way, I was like, wow, my 8th graders got so much out of like this, like the first piece of this. And it was continuing that as we continued the unit, then they went to the next part and they learned about riding the rails and what that was like. And it was very cool.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where students can work independently, but you definitely as a teacher need to guide what, you know, like you're guiding the conversation along as they're playing. So they're engaged in the simulation, but also you're having real conversations. But yeah, from American Revolution, I think you read through these. Immigrant experience, Western expansion, World War II, Civil Rights Movement, fighting for freedom. Like there's so many it's just very cool. So there are 7 missions that they can go on, but each one takes like a large chunk of time. It's not going to happen instantly. It's not like they can zip through it. And also they just have lots of cool teacher resources. So when you go to the website itself, kids can play. You have to set it up as a teacher. Again, it's free for them to be able to get into it. And then for teaching purposes, they have like teacher meetups. They have additional information about those topics. So maybe you don't even want to use the full simulator, but you want to be able to have resources for your classroom. You can do that. And this media project they've put together in the About section explains the background, like why to use Mission US, where like they're coming from, the awards they've won with this setup, and then the teacher dashboard. And I love that I can see where my students are. And it's not just the whole thing like this kid's finished it. It's like this kid is on this question.
Sure.
And I can go walk over and talk to a kid and be like, all right, where are you at? Or what's in your group? Like, what are you doing? Or what have you problem solved?
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of really cool pieces to it.
Yeah. For instance, on the teacher meetups that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening to this on the day that it drops, which is on Monday, April 7th, 2025, they've got one on Tuesday, the 8th, from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time on history and the environment. And they're going to talk about, it's Earth Month, so they're talking about history and the environment with a look at the Mission US interactive games, A Cheyenne Odyssey, and Up from the Dust, which we just discussed. And then they have a guest on who is a sustainability science manager and tribal liaison at the South Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. So,
yeah,
pretty cool. And it looks like there's just a Zoom link, so I assume it's just free to join, and you can go and
jump on in. And there's like a little registration link, and then you can jump on in.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a really great collection of resources for educators and topics that it's not always the topics that you would like. I mean, the things that we talk about in history, I guess. But sometimes there's just so overwhelming. You're like, okay, we're going to just briefly, we only have, 3 days to cover this in class. Yeah. So that way, because trying to teach history, obviously history is always happening. So there's so much to always cover. And this is a great way to like zone in on some very specific conversations with your students and engage them with like feeling the content a little bit more, which I thought was very cool. So Mission US teaches some very cool, interesting pieces of U.S. history, along with engaging your students in like simulation games and having them learn and discuss and reflect about these times in history. And I think it's just super cool. So even if you are not a social studies teacher, I would suggest checking it out. As a teacher, I'm always learning things, even if I don't teach the content area. And it's one of those like, wow, like playing this is going to teach you some background of things you just might want to know. And also, it would be something you could expose your kids to or share with social studies teachers that are around you if you don't teach social studies. So it's just something to check out. I suggest it's a very cool site and a very cool way to engage your kids in some social studies conversations.
Yeah, it's put together by the WNET Group, which is a nonprofit group that runs New York 13, the PBS station, and a bunch of other PBS stations and NPR stations on the East Coast. So pretty cool. Funded by the Center for Public Broadcasting and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Kind of a neat setup.
Yeah. So Mission US, check it out. It's fun to engage your kids in. And hey, they get to name a cow. So there you go. Thanks for tuning in. This has been the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast. If you ever have any questions, you can find me on Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook, Instagram, SmartinWI. And if you want to get more information on the links to the technology discussed in this episode, you can visit smartinwi.com. If you'd like to support the show, please consider buying me a coffee or two. Visit buymeacoffee.com/SmartinWI or visit smartinwi.com and click on that cute little purple coffee cup. Your donations help keep the show going. New episodes each week. Thanks for listening. Go educate and innovate.
The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast and the Smart NWI website are those of the author, Shannon Martin, and not of her employer. Prior to using any of the technologies discussed on this podcast, please consult with your employer regulations. This podcast offers no guarantee that these tools will work for you as described, but we sure hope they do. And we will talk to you next week right here on the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast.